I have used my over 30 years of reading experience to help me pick the 10 manga that I think I should prioritise, and in today's video we're going to talk about that list. I only started reading manga about 6 weeks ago, and in that 6 weeks I've read over 62 volumes. I feel like that 62 volumes has given me an idea of what it is I enjoy about manga in general. But on top of the 6 week experience I've got reading manga, I've got over 30 years experience of just reading in general as a hobby, and that has given me a lot of knowledge about what it is I enjoy from reading, and I want to use that knowledge that I have gained over the years to help me hopefully save some money and not waste on this new medium that I have fell in love with, because manga reading can be bloody expensive. To do this video I have done an insane amount of research to make sure that I'm not wasting too much money on this hobby. Manga can be quite expensive, so I wanted to narrow down books that I think I'm really going to enjoy, but books that are also quite available or relatively affordable to buy on the used market, because a lot of people out there are selling manga books at crazy prices. Without further ado, I'm just going to dive straight into the list. When I get to each book, I will tell you why I chose this book and what I think I will enjoy about it as well. They're in no particular order. All 10 of these books I think I will thoroughly enjoy, but hopefully once I start going through the list, you might kind of get a vibe for the taste of books that I have and be able to bang some recommendations in the comments. As I've said, I am new to manga, so if you have any recommendations for books that you think I might enjoy based on my taste, please bang them down below. So the first series that I want to prioritise, and I've actually started this, I'm 2 chapters into it, is Hunter x Hunter, which was recommended to me by a work colleague who told me it was about a young boy who wants to become a hunter, but in the background is searching for his father, who he doesn't know. That grabbed my attention immediately because I was raised by a single mum and remember my earlier years, basically from as early as I can remember to being about 18 years old, a desire, like an intense desire to find out who my dad was and figure out if he could bring anything positive into my life. And I just felt like something was missing. I did meet my dad when I was like 19 years old, and unfortunately things didn't turn out the way that I planned, but it played such a huge part in my childhood. And just knowing that this is part of this story for me just makes it interesting. I want to see how that theme is written and to see if I personally can relate to that. I find that if I can relate to a story, I usually engage with it better. Tonally, I don't know what to expect. I have started the first 2 chapters on Shonen Jump and it seems quite humorous at the minute, almost similar to the start of Dragon Ball. I'm about 9 volumes into Dragon Ball. I feel like I missed the boat with that because I didn't read it as a kid, but just the introduction to Goku feels quite similar to the introduction to the main character in here. I don't know where the story is going to go. I'm going into this really as blind as I possibly can, but I am excited. I was torn between this and One Piece. I've had a lot of people recommend One Piece, but just from the plot lines and where this story appears to be going, I feel like Hunter x Hunter is probably a better place for me to start. The next book on the list, and a completely different reason for choosing this one, is Vinland Saga. This is more to do with my previous taste in reading outside of manga and just in fantasy fiction in general. And one of my favourite fantasy books that I've ever read was Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, part of the Bloodsworn Saga. It's a Norse-inspired Viking story about kind of half gods fighting against gods that have reawakened, trying to take over the world. I really enjoyed the battle scenes in that book. I really enjoyed the ships and just the lore behind the story. And I feel like Vinland Saga is the closest thing that I've found so far within manga. It also helps that I own currently, I believe, pretty much the entire series apart from 2 or 3 volumes. Once I've got the full collection, I will be starting it. I am trying my best to start reading books when I own them all, so I don't have to have breaks between, because I'm quite easy to forget things. One of my top priorities when I read any book is character growth. I really like well fleshed out characters that make realistic decisions, and this is another reason that I chose this series. From reading online, I've heard about Thorfinn, who is the main character that this story follows. I don't mind characters who are morally ambiguous, but I do like characters to try and learn from past mistakes and things, and I believe that that's what I'm going to get from this story. I'm excited to read Thorfinn's story. I'm excited to see how he used to be and where he grows as a character to become, and I'm hoping he becomes what I would class as like just one of the good dudes. The third story I'm adding on to this list is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and the reason I smile about this is because it was a very late entry, and it's an entry that really is going to be challenging my comfort zone. a lot of the reading that I do, even within fantasy, I like to keep to a little bit of realism. I don't mind fantasy elements. That is where I kind of started reading. I love fantasy elements with dragons and things like that, and mages and wizards, but I like it to also just feel less absurd. And I believe that this series is going to add a lot of absurdity that I am not used to. But I have heard so many good things about this series, and I feel like manga is opening up a lot of doors for me and really challenging my comfort zones, and it's really taking me out of comfort zones. And that's what I love about reading. I'm really a big fan of trying things that you've never tried before, because I feel like if you do what you always did, you'll get what you always got. And I want more from reading. I think we should always challenge ourselves with new genres, new mediums, and that is what this series is for me. I'm really going into this quite blind, but it is like a challenge read for me that I think I am going to have a really good time with. Next up is a 2-in-1. So technically there's 11 books on this list, but I'm saying there's 10 because I don't know which one I want to read most out of these two, and it's my list, so I'll do what I want. The first one of these two is Attack on Titan. The second book is Fullmetal Alchemist, and I really don't know which way to prioritise. These two popped up because I googled, I want to read manga books with morally heroic characters, and both of these actually came up on the list. Why I lean slightly towards, I think, Fullmetal Alchemist is because I'm told that there's a really nice relationship between the brothers. Both characters that you follow in are actually quite nice characters, and I like the idea of an alchemy-based magic system. I really enjoyed the first book in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I do like quite different magic systems. However, I have read the first two books in Attack on Titan via Kindle Unlimited. I don't know how many there is on there, but that also gives this a bit of a leg up. The fact that I know that I can get some volumes on Kindle Unlimited before deciding if I want to commit financially to the rest of the series. I don't have that option really with Fullmetal Alchemist because I can't really find any digital formats out there, so I will have to bite the bullet and just buy and try, I guess, with Fullmetal Alchemist. Both of these are series that I'm excited for. I just don't know which one to prioritise. The next series I want to read is a series called A Silent Voice. I do believe this was quite popular and that there's been some sort of film adaptation that is like renowned, I guess, within anime. I unfortunately missed the boat when I was a kid. I didn't watch any anime, I didn't read any manga, so it's new to me. There's a couple of reasons I want to read this. Firstly, because I really enjoyed reading books about youth and adolescence, as long as it's done well. One of my favourite books that I've read outside of manga is Boy's Life by Robert McCannon. That book even did a really good job of just bringing back so many nostalgic feelings and just making me feel young again. And I think when a book can do that, it is just magical. I'm hoping that this book can give that, but I also know that there's darker themes, or deeper themes at least, within the story that cover bullying and growth of youth, and maybe the way as kids that we can do things to try and impress other people and make just bad choices. I believe that this story is about a young boy who bullied a deaf girl, and later on in life they, I don't know how, but some sort of reconnection, and it's him just trying to rebuild that friendship or relationship. And for me, that just sounds like quite an interesting topic. The second reason I want to read this is because I work in a school, and a lot of the time I spend a lot of my energy wasted actually on trying to convince children to put down iPads and pick up books. And I feel like this would be a really good story to be able to sit down and discuss with young people that I work with, and hopefully do read-alongs and things like that, as well as helping them find a way to fall in love with books. It might open their eyes to maybe mistakes that they make as young people at school, or things that they're going through and how they can get through it. So this is one that I definitely anticipate on taking into my career and really kind of getting something else from this book other than just the sheer enjoyment of reading it at home. Next up is obviously going to divide opinions. I went for 20th Century Boys, and there's going to be some people going, no, go for Monster first. No, I'm going for 20th Century Boys. And it's because I actually have volume 1 of this on my shelf and I have volume 1 of Monster. Read both blurbs. This one sounds more interesting to me. Just from reading blurbs, it says humanity, having faced extinction at the end of the 20th century, would not have entered the new millennium if it weren't for them. In 1969, during their youth, they created a symbol In 1997, as the coming disaster slowly starts to unfold, that symbol returns. This is the story of a group of boys who try to save the world. That just sounds mental to me. Like, a group of lads saving the world is such a huge, like, scope of a story. And it just made me think, like, well, how do they save the world? And if they're saving the world, what is the threat that is so big that it could be the end of the world? But I also really enjoy, like, reunion stories. One of my favourite parts of It, the Clown by Stephen King was the first 200 or so pages where all the friends are reuniting, and it goes back into their past and talks about their youth and stuff like that. So reunion stories just grab me anyway, because I always kind of want to know, like, who everyone is, how they affected their youth, who was friends. I'm just a bit of a nosy bastard. So look, I went for 20th Century Boys. You're not going to change my mind. I will read both at some point, but this was the one that I chose to prioritise, and it's my list, so I'll do what I want. The next one was a story that when I heard the premise, I kind of just went, oh, trigger me intrigued. Like, this sounds interesting. And it is Homunculus. I don't know anything about this story other than the fact that it appears to be about a homeless man who didn't used to be homeless. He actually used to be relatively wealthy, but he's homeless for some reason. And he comes across a person who can do a surgery, and that surgery is to give him the ability to, like, have a sixth sense almost, where he can see people, but he sees them in their, I guess, internal form, sees them as like warped beings, and can see all of their insecurities and the negative things about them. I don't know any more than that, but just that premise alone had me asking so many questions about the themes that it's going to cover in this story. I think it's going to cover a lot about humanity and the ugly side of humanity. And that, for me, is interesting. I do love stories that have good character studies and really dive into sometimes the kind of brutal side of humanity and the evil that we can do, and also the facades, I guess, that we put on as people, and the characters that we put on to show the world, to make people believe that we are a certain way because we feel like that's what we have to do to be accepted. That's what I want from this story. I'm hoping I'm going to get that. Having looked at a few panels online on Google Images and stuff, I'm excited to look at the art in this. I'm still learning kind of what styles of art I enjoy, but one thing I feel like I do enjoy is realism. I don't know what different styles of art are, because I didn't do art at school and I'm not a good drawer, but I like when art is drawn in quite a realistic manner. And from looking at some of the panels in this, the art just looks quite detailed and just well put together. The panels look quite nice to read. So yeah, really excited for this one. Speaking of really good art, the next story that went onto my list was solely because of the art initially. I was on Reddit and I came across this panel and I thought, that looks gorgeous. That looks really, really nice. And I wanted to know a bit more. So I went digging a bit deeper, and it turned out it was from a series called Kingdom. Dug a bit deeper because I hadn't heard of it. And it turns out it's like a hugely popular series in Japan, but it hadn't been translated into English until recently. I don't know how recently, but I've been on Shonen Jump and it's on there. I think there's about 80 chapters so far that have been translated and put on Shonen Jump. So I was just like, this is ticking all the boxes. The art itself reminded me quite a lot of some of the art that you see within Berserk, minus the, like, severed heads on swords and the other barbaric dark things that you see within Berserk. But the story sounds interesting for me. I love an underdog story, and this appears to follow a young orphan who wants to go on and just do the biggest, baddest things and become just somebody that is of importance. And I bloody love that. I love stories where people start off and nobody respects them, nobody cares about them, and they build their own path and they build their own story and journey and history, and they become important and important enough to be remembered and to make a difference and for people to notice them. And that is probably the reason now I am even more excited. The art is what brought me to this story, but the plot and the premise behind it, I think, is what will absolutely make me love this. Second to last one, we are nearly there, I promise you. It is Blame, and this is another one that's going to take me a little bit out of my comfort zone. I can't remember who it was I was speaking to, but somebody recommended Blame to me and said that there's not as much dialogue in Blame as you might be used to in some other mangas that you've been introduced to in your short time of joining us here in the manga community. I opened it up last night actually on my Kindle, because that again has the first few volumes on Kindle Unlimited, and there were barely any conversation at all, and I thought, what is this? But it also reminded me that manga isn't just dialogue, it's also art, and I want this to be my kind of way in to learning how to appreciate both sides of the storytelling, not to just look at the dialogue and rush through the art, but to use the art to tell a story. And that's what I tried doing last night. I spent about half an hour just flicking through pages and really kind of teaching myself a different way of reading manga. And I think it will expand my experience just in the genre as a whole, or in the medium as a whole, because I would say I'm guilty over the first 60 something volumes of maybe not taking as much time as I should on certain panels and not using the art and the panels to dig deeper or look at maybe little hints and foreshadowing that the authors put within there or the artists have put within there. And I think Blame will just be a really good way for me to just expand the way that I read manga. It also reminded me a little bit of Fallout, the game. I used to play Fallout a lot. I'm an avid gamer, and just the post-apocalyptic kind of going through buildings, just walking around barren places with not much else happening. I have only read literally the first maybe 20 pages, so I don't know if it completely changes, but that was the vibe I was getting initially, and I'm excited really to explore the art side of manga rather than just the storytelling. The last story I've put on my list is another challenge. There's quite a few challenges on here, but they're all challenges that I think I'm going to enjoy, and that is Dorohedoro. This is another one, similar to JoJo's Adventures, that I expect to be a little bit bonkers, and it's one of the reasons I want to pick it up. It, from looking online, appears to be about a man who hasn't got a man's head. I think he's had some sort of curse put on him, and he's got the head of something else, a creature or whatever, and he's going around hunting, trying to find the things or people that put this curse on him. But tonally, from looking online, it seems like it is like serious, dark, gritty, but also comedic. And that grabbed my attention because I have found over my years of reading that sometimes adding comedy into a piece of literature can sometimes take away the stakes, and it just feels lower stakes when you add a lot of humour into stories. One of the few authors that I have found that do comedy quite well and still keeps the stakes feeling quite high is Nicholas Eames, who wrote Kings of the Wild. That's a really good story about a band of retired mercenaries who come back one last hurrah to save one of their children, and that kept me kind of hooked all the way through. There was some really like knee-slapping comedy in it, but I also cared what happened at the end. So I'm interested to see how they do it within manga. And that was one of the main reasons that I picked this up. Some of these books will 100% go down as some of my favourite manga that I've ever read. I know that already because I've done enough research to know what I enjoy. But I am now also relying on you to give me recommendations. So if you have heard anything that I've said in this video where you've thought, oh, based on him saying that, I think he would love this, please let me know. Manga is an expensive hobby. I can see that. The resale value of these books is high. Sometimes you're paying new prices for used books. So in an ideal world, I'm quite interested in books that are affordable. I don't want to spend my entire savings account on books. I've got 3 kids, as I've said. Life is expensive. So any books that may be on Shonen Jump or Viz Media, or books that aren't stupid prices on Vinted or eBay, I'm open to suggestions. Or if you've got any suggestions for me on how to make digital kind of media affordable. I have got Libby. I am already using the apps that I know of, but any other ways to try and make this hobby more affordable. My idea behind collecting with manga is to read as much as I can digitally, which is very unusual for me. I've always been a paperback kind of guy, but I'm going to try and read as much as I can digitally, and if I love the series, I'll then go on to collect it. But I don't want to leave books on my shelf that I don't know if I love. I've already made that mistake. I've bought probably 50, 60 volumes of books that I don't know if I'm going to love yet. that is just, I guess, I'm learning. I am learning. And I don't want to continue to make the same mistakes. I don't want this to be too expensive. So please, recommendations down below. If you've watched to this point, I love you the most, and I will see you in the next one.